welcome back to my channel, and you're watching The Brown Feminist. Welcome back to another episode of Real Interview Questions I Was Asked. I actually gave a bunch of interviews trying to move into different clinical research coordinator positions since like December, January of last year. And one of the two kind of positions that I'm showing you guys is episode 1, 2, and 3, which all show like interviewing for one position where I did a phone screen. I did like a meeting with all the managers. And then an in-person meet with every single team member. So if you'd like to see that, I'm gonna link it up there as well as down below in the description. And you can see how that particular clinical research role was actually a little bit more geared toward clinical stuff. They were looking for somebody ideally with a nursing background, which I had, somebody who can do like the patient assessments as well as interventions and some of the paperwork associated with like a pharma-sponsored clinical trial. Now the second role, which I'm going to tell you guys about today, and that is the one I ended up accepting, was just one single hour-long interview with one PI who kind of manages his own project within a larger like research center. And this is very different. This role had a lot less dependence on my clinical skills, although it was always an added bonus. Having a nursing license, even this PI said, was like great, because now and then we do like outsource some of our blood work and assessments to another clinic, and sometimes it's cheaper if an in-house research nurse can do it for them. So that is always a bonus on a job application. However, my role was a lot more geared towards what's traditionally like an academic research associate role. So this particular position focused a lot more on my past ability to do research writing or medical writing. They wanted me to do a lot more of manuscript writing, submissions, grant preparations, preparing like PowerPoints for the PI to go and present at different conferences, and then providing some managerial support to the other RAs of the clinic who each run different trials. So currently, in the role that I have taken through this interview, there are two RAs, so they needed to know that I have enough expertise and knowledge in the past to actually manage RAs who are doing like getting stuck in maybe research ethics board applications, or RAs who are also learning to write manuscripts for the first time. And the time that you can see these kind of roles happen more in hospital settings, much less in, I want to say, CROs or anything like that. So these research coordinator roles will help you grow in a whole different way. So I felt that this was a better kind of opportunity for me, because this way I was not only doing like more writing and more like finding out where the monies come from, who are the main granting agencies, main regulatory concerns and stuff like that, but I was able to at the site level start seeing the PI's vision and the research team, which comprises of a few different PIs working together, maybe in a specialty, whether it's oncology or gastrology or neurology. I could see like their vision of where they want to take the research institute in the next 5 years, 10 years, and I could pitch in ideas. So I felt like I had more of that ear to speak to the PIs and learn directly from them, and then grow with a more managerial role. And the promise kind of was too that if I keep doing well over the next couple of years, I can transition to a more senior coordinator role for the entire research team, which comprises of like 3, 4, 5 PIs within the same specialty. So in this role, as you can see, I'm going to start giving you the interview questions, but before I get into it, just keep this in mind, that there are different roles out there which are called clinical research coordinator, but they don't always mean the same kind of job. Obviously, it differs from organization to organization. It also like depends on just what they're looking for. Because in my same research team, there are other coordinators and there are other research assistants who purely do trial-focused pharma-sponsored trials. And so for them, you would get typical questions like what I've described before in my first 3 videos of this series, as well as my crash course. So very much like you're doing a phase 2 trial for this pharmaceutical company, like how do you handle monitor visits, how do you do blah, blah, blah. Whereas in the role that I am going to show you today is going to be a little bit more niche, But I know there's a lot of you out there who are transitioning in from basic science roles and from different like biomedical science backgrounds and other backgrounds who have like more traditional academic training in this. Maybe you don't have as huge a clinical background. Maybe you don't have a nursing license. You don't have a medical, like international medical graduate license or anything like that. But you have a very strong foundation in academia through pharmaceutical studies or like biology or like something else you've done in biomedical sciences, and you can use your statistical analysis and your like manuscript writing and your understanding of grant writing and pitching ideas, and you can really work towards this kind of role and you can completely embrace it and do really well in it. So I do get a lot of emails from a lot of you guys who are transitioning from these roles. So I do have another video if you are one of those people who are kind of moving over from a traditional biomedical sciences undergrad or master's, you've done like lab work, wet labs or whatever, public health, and you're trying to move into clinical research. These are the kind of roles that you would best fit into. This doesn't mean you can't go into clinical trials, but going into clinical trials might need a little bit more retraining by doing like a clinical research certification in a college or something like that. But this kind of role that I'm describing today, that's gonna let you do the fastest, smoothest transition from your role to this, from your past experience to this clinical research coordinator role. So once again, the kind of role that they were interviewing for had needed to have some kind of an understanding of epidemiology. I didn't, and I still ended up getting the role, which means there is a way to do this interview that you can kind of show your transferable skills. They wanted somebody very intelligent, able to problem solve for themselves, willing to be published as a co-author, do a lot of manuscript writing, do some degree of data analysis. I had mentioned I don't have a huge statistical background, and that wasn't an issue for this team, because there is a team statistician that we get like hardcore meta-analysis done by. But a general understanding of like simple, like just run and see if this is like a good p-value or a good z-value or something like that, like the confidence intervals, is this really statistically significant, simple things like that, I was able to do, and that has come in super handy. So that's the kind of role they want, like a very scientific research associated approach, as well as having that little like clinical experience, clinical background, ability to go through patient files and very quickly understand, oh, what disease this must be, what kind of diagnosis this might be, what kind of intervention this patient might need, what kind of safety precautions in the clinic we might need before handling a patient like that little bit of clinical understanding. And then finally, a bit of managerial role. So with the research assistants, if I have helped students in the past, if I have helped anybody, kind of guide them and talk to them and manage them whenever they're kind of getting stuck in the traditional trial settings, whereas like, oh my God, this research assistant is really struggling with this particular trial, the monitor has a bunch of complaints, they have not been resolved in a few months, help them. Or like, oh my God, they're repeatedly getting these like ethics submissions rejected by, and getting back like complaints from the ethics board saying this is missing, that is missing. Maybe you can like do a mentoring session with them. So these are the roles that they had advertised for. So going on, at this part of the video, I'm going to be doing the act out that I usually do for you guys about how I handled the interview questions. And I'm gonna do like the 4 or 5 main broad questions we did, because in this 1-hour interview with the PI, I basically had like a solid conversation with them. And it was like really friendly, really easy. They were basically assessing my, I wanna say my IQ, my transferable skills, my ability to problem solve, my ability to see similarities and differences in past roles and current roles, and just be like a very intuitive person. So it was more of a personality test, but there were obviously some technical questions involved. So here we go. So question 1 was, hi Faria, so what exactly interests you in this role? And to this, my answer was this. I have been doing clinical research for quite a while. I have handled all of this like clinical trial stuff. And I feel like now that I have like my nursing license, I have an academic master's within like a biomedical research background. So I have the clinical side, I have the academic biomedical knowledge, and now I have a lot of hands-on experience in doing like trial work. But sometimes what I feel was missing in doing roles that were purely research nurse coordinator for clinical trials and pharma-sponsored trials is that I do feel a little bit left out of the intellectual process. I feel like, we don't get a say on the protocol. We just get the protocol from the pharma, and my job is basically to implement it. And I'm happy to do that. I think like it takes a lot of knowledge to do that, and I've developed all that knowledge of the regulatory processes and everything. But I was starting to miss a little bit of that intellectual challenge I used to have in academia. And of course, I think that a role that allows me to do a little bit more of like managing RAs that I saw in your job ad, as well as, now and then problem solving with all of my extensive, idea of how trials run, and then working with your team of PIs who do these physician-initiated studies. I think I can play a huge role in that. I love medical writing. I love synthesizing knowledge, working towards knowledge translation goals. I love the kind of work you do, especially in this specialty. I did have a lot of patients of this population. Like I know you guys do like a lot of Crohn's and colitis and advanced GI cancers as well. So for all of those things, I feel like I have the clinical knowledge and I also have the research knowledge. What I would love to learn from this team, and one of the reasons I applied is I understand that you publish quite frequently, you attend amazing conferences, and you have huge funding, which is allowing you to grow at a massive pace and do higher impact. I saw that you also work with like epidemiological data, public health data, and do patient-focused trials that are initiated by the physician beyond the pharma one. So that means you get to see the big picture with your epidemiological public health studies, from what I understand. And then you guys are like, kind of seeing, okay, within like a hospital environment, how these things can come into practice, or doing little RCTs and trials to see whether or not doctors are willing to use certain predictive models of assessing risks for cancers and things like that. And I thought that was just absolutely fascinating, and I think that would allow me to grow a little bit more in this role, because any of the other roles that I've interviewed for were strictly like clinical trials, and I feel like I've been there, I've done that, and I can take on some more. I'm happy to do that part, but I'm ready for the next challenge. So I'm very excited to have applied for this. Okay, so that's what my first question was. The second question was this. Okay, so can you elaborate on some of these prior experiences that you mentioned, suppose in grant submissions, manuscript writing? Like, what exactly was your role in it? Did you like review them before submitting them, proofreading, editing? Like, what exactly was your role in it? To that, my answer was this. Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that I did is I worked really hands-on with the PI, understanding the PI's like long-term vision. Okay, this is what they're trying to achieve. And so in order to do that, these are some of the next 3 years or 5 years worth of research goals, and then helping to find like, okay, which grants, especially the Canadian like national granting agencies are like CIHR and stuff. And then every specialty usually has like their own network, whether like when I was in infectious disease research, we had like the CAR, and we had like the CAN Hep C, which were like hepatitis C, HIV kind of related networks and communities, which gave out funding. And then of course, like each specialty, whether it's neurology or something else, they have their own networks which give out funding. Then again, within the hospital divisions as well, there's funding available for clinician investigators. So I have experience in the past in like kind of going through them, seeing which grants might be a good fit and can take our goals as a research team forward. And then working with the PI would obviously be the one to decide like the overall structural design or methodology they want to use in that particular research project. But once they gave me like the core skeleton, I would then go in and like write up the literature review, the background, like the timelines, the budget that goes in with the grant, how much realistic like personnel is leading, what the timeline will be, and all of that, and just make it a finished grant, making sure that the grant is meeting all of the requirements of the granting agency, and communicating with all the co-PIs, getting the signature, doing the administrative bit, and then contributing to any kind of intellectual stuff where I feel like I have gathered enough knowledge, which might take a while whenever I'm transitioning to kind of a new field. So that's kind of what I did for granting. And then for manuscript, I have done several manuscripts since like my grad school days. I've done first author manuscripts where like I was the one to generate the data, analyze the data, present it, and then do like the main manuscript writing as well, and then had like people review it. So in cases of collaborating with others as well, I have like done back and forth where I've like adapted a manuscript maybe written by another like junior master student or someone, and helped them to adapt it for a particular journal, and then communicated with the journal, heard back, done the reviews, and then sent it back and do the whole process. So yeah, I'm very, very happy to do it. I do understand that coming into a new specialty, I'll need to spend some time in reading and familiarizing myself with the field-specific terminology, especially because this seems to be like a little bit technical as well. I do not have a huge background in epidemiology, but I'm like super interested if you need me to like start learning SAS or anything like that. And they were pretty happy with that answer. They did mention that they will not need me to learn coding and statistics with like all of those advanced tools. However, a general understanding of what they mean and being able to interpret them, being able to communicate with a statistician and tell them, this is what we're trying to get out of it. This makes sense, this doesn't make sense. Can you run these numbers for us using these kind of tests? And then we can at least interpret what the findings are properly. So that's something I would have to learn and grow into. Now, number 3 were, please give examples on your past experience with pharma-sponsored and physician-initiated studies. For this one, I had to be very fair. I had not done a ton of physician-initiated trials. So this was my answer. I have a ton of experience in pharma-sponsored studies. In my most recent role last year, I worked with like a neurology and neurosurgery division within the same hospital that you were in. And we were in like a very time-sensitive critical care environment. So I was like doing night shifts and day shifts and on-calls, and like we were screening patients actively, a team of us 3, and I was the primary on it. And so we would have to like get people in as soon as like they had a certain like accident and trauma kind of cases. And so they would come in and I would go in and consent them and just make sure all the interventions were done on time, consent was done. It was a very sensitive environment, and I still made sure like there were no like major protocol deviations, there were no major regulatory mishaps. I was personally responsible for all the data collection, CRFs, entry of the data into the EDC, as well as like any kind of regulatory documentation that needed to be maintained, signed, making sure that blood work was processed on site and sent to like a central thing, because this was an international study. And then whenever like results from that blood work would come in, making sure the investigator had like taken a look at it and made sure nothing's like super standing out, submitting any kind of SAE, AE documents or PD documents both to the sponsor and to the RABs, making sure the studies are all amendments are up to date, ICFs are up to date, and their continuing reviews are done on the central RAB submission system. Again, I'm familiar with the portal that you guys use in this hospital research institute, so that's also like a bonus. So I have pretty extensive knowledge. I did all of the monitor visits, investigators binders, and all of that. Because of my clinical background as well, I was able to assist with patient assessments on certain scales that were pre-approved by the sponsor, as well as certain interventions like infusion drugs and things like that with another primary RN. And so in terms of investigator-initiated studies, I have assisted on a lot of them, but not necessarily for trials. So I understand that when you were doing an investigator-initiated clinical trial, you have to go through and register with like clinicaltrials.gov, and you have to get like a whole like full board REB review. So I do have all of the knowledge of that, but I haven't done it per se by myself and had like those all those metrics in place, and I would love to kind of do that and get my hands wet in that. What I have done for physician-initiated studies has been more qualitative research. I've done like a lot of patient interviews, semi-structured interviews, recruiting patients, screening patients, conducting the interviews, doing data extraction, or doing like file audits and chart reviews for a certain period of time from certain departments across certain hospitals. So all of that I have a lot of knowledge on. And yeah, definitely I know that you also do trials, so I'm definitely willing to learn that portion of it. And they were quite satisfied with that answer as well. So my next question that they asked was question number 4. And that was, what questions do you have for me? Now this one, I wanted to be fully like honest. I wanted to say everything that was on my mind and get a clear picture, because by this point in my career, I'm not just looking to please my employers, I'm looking to find what is the best fit. And so this was my answer. I think I have a good idea based on what you're doing, based on like the elaborate job description you'd put out. So thank you so much for that. I think what I would still want to know is like how many PIs exactly are in this research team. I don't know much about this particular research group within your specialty. And like, do I just support one PI? Do I support multiple PIs? Or at one time, how many projects are you seeing me juggle? And you know, in case I have to go on leave, are there other people who will like tag team those things for me? And all of the yeah, like what do you think a typical day would look like? Would it be more of a 9 to 5? Is it a hybrid? Is it on site? And what kind of flexibility in hours would you require? For example, in my last role I had to do a lot of night shifts, but do you see this traditionally as like a 9 to 5 or, you know, 8 to 6, whatever, like within those daylight hours kind of role? Or what time of the year or how many times a year do you think that you have these, like, you know, time crunches? Like, I guess during CIHR grant submissions there must be one, and so there must be a peak period. So what are those usually like, and how are they managed? How many times a week will I get to sit down and have a chat with you, or is there anyone else I'm going to report to? What is that structure going to be like? How am I going to be assessed for my performance? So these were like a whole bunch of questions, but I obviously didn't bombard the PI with all of them at once. We went back and forth and had a conversation, and they were really happy to provide that kind of insight into the team structure, and I was really satisfied with what I heard. Now, that wasn't all. Finishing off, they did also ask me question number 5. So Freya, what is your 5-year plan? And so this is a tricky one where you have to be honest, but not too honest, because you do want to make them feel that as long as things go well and they have spent a lot of time and energy in training you, you will give them a few good years of service. So this was my answer. My 5-year plan is definitely to grow in a role like this. I've moved around from different like subspecialties, I feel, in the last 3 years, which was great because I got to learn about like from acute critical care to like more like transitional units and geriatrics and pediatrics, and I've had a chance to do all of that. But now at this stage of my career, like I really want to like stay in one place and work there for at least like 2 to 3 years in a coordinator role or an associate role, and just learn to take on more responsibility with a little bit more managerial insight and a little bit more ability to manage a few research assistants, as well as like do my own projects, with the hopes that there is an opportunity to grow within the organization, becoming like a senior coordinator, a project manager, something like that. That would be my next 3 to 5 year hopes, if all goes well. And they were also pretty satisfied with that answer. I understood from what the conversations we had during that interview that that is also the kind of person they're grooming. It's not like they're filling in like a 6 months or a 1 year mat leave or anything. They were looking for somebody to take on this a pretty new and pretty small research institute, which is experiencing a large influx of research funding and has a potential to grow over the next 5 years. And so they asked at the very last question, number 6, was, is there anything else you want to add before we end our call? Is there anything else you would like us to know? Now, guys, this is an excellent opportunity when they ask you something like this in the end, because they won't always ask you. It's not always in the template of questions. There's a good chance that they're actually trying to see how you stand out. And while it is kind of their role to go after the interview and like think and brainstorm, like, okay, I interviewed these 3 or 5 candidates, how did they stand out? But it's so much easier when you can give it to them in an answer that they can immediately recall and connect, and you're basically doing half of their job for them and telling them exactly how you stand out. So this was my answer to this question. Well, I think you will find it pretty hard in the job market to find somebody who has my pretty unique set of combination of skills, because not a lot of nurses go into hardcore academic research, and then not a lot of like biomedical research background people have the same clinical knowledge as like someone with an MD or an RN would. And so I do feel that I bring both of these to the table. The next thing that's unique about me is that I already have a bunch of like first author, second author publications and technical reports. I've worked with the same hospital organization, so I won't have to like relearn everything from scratch. I know your EMR system, I know your REB board and how it functions and how the portals functions, and how like most of the hospital-based research institute that's so massive, like how it functions, who to contact, like who are the facilitators for this and that, and where I would go to figure out shipping of samples and processing. On top of that, because of my biomedical background, I can handle like biological samples from up to like level 3 and like handle them in like a very like, if it was like an HIV sample or a COVID sample, to anything that's like, a basic can be done in a level 1 in an open environment. So I have all of that training. I have the certifications needed to like ship samples internationally. I think the third and final thing I'll say is that I am a very personable people person. I'm pretty social in the workplace. I get along with almost everybody. I have great relationships with my past colleagues. We're still in touch. And so I do bring a lot of energy to the workplace. I am going to be the person who's going to probably dress up for Halloween and keep the team spirit going. So that's a little bit of additional thing to remember about me. There will be Christmas cookies every year. So I think that I offer something unique, and I'm really eager because I think at this point of my career, this is the kind of role I really am craving. Not just because I want a job and I want to like climb in my career, but because I think it can also like challenge me in ways that I had started to miss. So yeah, I really do hope you consider me for this role. I would want to tell you that of all the roles I've interviewed for in the last few months, like this is the one I am the most excited about, and I would be eager to accept a role like this. And so that was it. That's kind of how I did like 2 very hardcore points about like, guys, you're not gonna get this unique mix of an RN and an MSc. You're not gonna get somebody who has all of this knowledge already. So I'm a little bit more experienced than the average entry-level person. But 3, I bring in like that personality thing. So that's what's gonna make them remember me. Oh yeah, that friendly girl. Oh yeah, that girl who said like they like to dress up for Halloween. They must be great with people. Sometimes it's hard to express your personality type in a short interview. Like, hey, are you friendly? Yes, I am friendly. Like, you obviously can't justify that, but giving them a little like insight into your character and personality and what you bring to the team environment can give that additional little push to make them remember you when they're evaluating their top couple of candidates. And so this was really like a 1-hour nice chat. And we both, I think, went off of each other's vibes and personality. And we were like, I think this is going to be a good fit. And I've been in this role for about 3 months now. And I think so far it's been an excellent fit. I have grown in areas of clinical research I never thought I would step into. It's been challenging. I've had to actually like sit down 8-10 hours and like put my head to it and like figure things out that I never had done before. And at this stage, like having been in the clinical research field for 6-7 years, I think that's saying something, that you're constantly being challenged and you're constantly growing in a positive way in things that are like not just burnout work, but it's like things you're adding to your resume, things you're adding to your toolbox, things that are stimulating you every day and exciting you to go in and problem solve. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will keep you posted about how my job goes and how there are obviously some challenges of coming into a team where you already have the research assistants kind of there. Sometimes there can be pushback. Sometimes everyone has a different personality and you need to like kind of find out how to work your way into that, and managing and navigating all of these things, as well as a bunch of other exciting career pushing licenses that I'm preparing for right now. So I will make more videos for you guys soon. I hope you have a wonderful week, and once again, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content from me. Love you guys. This was The Brown Feminist. Bye. Hey guys, before you go, don't forget that I do offer one-on-one career counseling services in clinical research. So if you do feel that beyond the videos and the emails where I answer all of your questions, you need a little bit more of hands-on support, you're not getting those interviews and you're not really sure why, or you just don't know how to handle certain questions because of your, you don't have all the experiences, but you know that you can do the job. If you need some additional help in resume building, cover letter design, interview prep, or just general career consultations, I do offer this service now live. Find out more by clicking the link below. I have a whole video where I explain what services I offer, and there's a form there if you would like to sign up. Until next time, this was The Brown Feminist. Bye!